Welcome to the House of Truth. The, the day we're finishing our series on the patriarchs. Last week, last the last week, last time we talked about Jacob, about Joseph and his father. Now, in many ways, it was a prophetic picture of the history of Israel as well. The previous lesson, we talked about Joseph and his brothers. In the day, we're going to talk about the last days of Israel, the last days of the man Jacob, in the last day, in the words he said, how he framed the history of Israel. He prophetically framed their history all the way up to the last days of Israel as well, with his words before he died. Similar to how Noah, we looked at before in our previous one, before the patriarchs in chapter 10, how Noah framed the history of the human race after the Ham, Shem, Japheth incident with Ham looking upon his nakedness. So we're gonna see again. We're gonna see that repeated, but this time not the whole human race, just the people of Israel. And we begin here in Genesis 47, verses 28 through 31. And Jacob lived in Egypt 17 years. So the whole age of Jacob was 147 years. And the time drew near that Israel must die. And he called his son Joseph and said unto him, If I found grace in your sight, put, I pray you, your hand under my thigh, and deal kindly and truly with me. Bury me not, I pray, in Egypt. But I will lie with my fathers, and you shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me into their burying place. And he said, I will do as you have said. And he said, Swear unto me. And he swore unto him, and Israel bowed himself upon the bed's head. So what you know is Jacob lives in there 17 years. In our time here, we see the death of that he's going to die. He's about to die. Is 2,315 years since Adam was formed out of the dust. So our year's 2315, and as you recall in a previous lesson, we talked about how the Exodus, where we were shown, we said what happened 430 years after Abraham entered the promised land. And we looked at last time how when Joseph entered the promised land, when the house of Israel moved into Egypt, is 215 of those 430 years. So now the 17 years, so 232 of those 430 years have now expired. And remember, it was two parts. You'll live in a land that's not your own, true of Canaan, true of Egypt, and you'll be enslaved. It was not that they'd be enslaved 400 years. And the 400 years, if you recall, came from when Isaac was confirmed as the seed. That's when Abraham was told 400 years, Isaac being born when Abraham was 25 years to Abraham into the land Isaac was born, making Isaac 5 at that time. So that's our first thing of significance here, is the age of Jacob here. And he's 17 years, and his health, he had the problems that had to carry him down, except his health wasn't good when he got there. But his latter years here, even though his health's not been well, he's on this bedstead, have been better than his former years. And and perhaps I'm speaking to somebody. Perhaps you're because he got right with God and found and made and those paybacks that came to him from his wrong actions have finally came to an end. So he wants Joseph to bury him back in the land. Well, if you remember from our last lesson, when Jacob was going to go down to Egypt and see Joseph, his intention was to return to the land of Canaan because he saw what happened to Abraham and Isaac when they got out to the land of the calling, and God told him to go on down to Egypt. Joseph would close his eyes in death, and he would go back, and Jacob would return to his own land. Well, Jacob realizes he's not returned to his own land while returned to the promised land while alive. So this is why he gives this makes Joseph make this promise to him. We're going to continue on in Genesis 48 in verses 1 through 4. And it came to pass after these things that one told Joseph, "Behold, your father is sick." He took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And one told Jacob, said, "Behold, your son Joseph come to you." And Israel strengthened himself and sat upon the bed. And Jacob said unto Joseph, "God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me. It said unto me, Behold, I'll make you fruitful, multiply you. I'll make of you a multitude of people. And I'll give this land to your seed after you for an everlasting possession." So notice he takes his two sons, Manasseh the oldest, then Ephraim. The normal order in the Bible, the oldest is named, they name him in birth order. So he's come to bring those two sons. And when he gets there, Jacob reminds him of what God said, making them, he'll give them that land to a seed after him. Again, for an eternal possession, faith that God's going to bring about what he said. And unlike his earlier years, he's not trying to make it happen on his own. He's not trying to help God bring about the will of God. And he's not trying to circumvent the known will of God either. So he just expresses faith that he's going to do this. But because of this, he's got some. Because he knows God's going to give that to his seed for eternal. He is starting to give some instructions concerning his descendants, starting with these two grandsons of his. We're going to read about this here in Genesis 48 verses 5 through 9. Now give your two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, which were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came unto you in Egypt, are mine. As Reuben and Simeon, they are mine. Your issue, which you begat after them, shall be yours, and which shall be called after the name of, and shall be called to the name of their brethren in their inheritance. As for me, when I came from Padam, Rachel died by me in the land of Canaan in the way, when there was yet a little way to come to Ephrath. And I buried her in the way to Ephrath, the same as Bethlehem. Israel beheld Joseph's son, said, "Who are these?" And Joseph said, "These are my sons, whom God has given me this place. Said, bring them, I pray you, unto me, and I'll bless them." Okay, now first I want you to notice that he says they'll be as his. Reuben's the oldest, Simeon's the second oldest, but he names the sons in reverse order. Remember, it was Manasseh and Ephraim a minute ago. Now it's Ephraim and Manasseh. So the oldest, so he names the younger son first, indicating in paralleling him with Reuben and Simeon. And Joseph is 56 years old at this time. Remember, he was 39 when Jacob moved to Egypt. And Jacob, as we saw last time, says he hasn't attained to the age of his father. He's 147, knows he's about to die, knows lifespans are getting shorter, but he didn't really recognize that Joseph's not likely to have more children, because he himself didn't get married till he was 77. But the ages are being cut or whittled down, perhaps more than he's aware of here. But nonetheless, that's what he said. So there's going to be, so if there's any others, they're going to be called, if Joseph does have any more children, that will be the tribe of Joseph, he says. But these are going to replace Joseph among the sons of who Jacob is counting as his sons. And now he wants to bless them. And now, before I go into there, one last thing here about Rachel. A reminder, remember Rachel, really in Hebrew, Rachel? She died in Bethlehem, and they just had to bury her by a tree instead of a pillar for her, like a tombstone. She could not, beside the road, a tombstone. I don't think she had the tree. That was just Deborah, Rebecca's nurse, of the oak of weeping. But anyways, he just had to bury her beside the road. He couldn't get to her. She did not get buried in the place of honor, Machpelah. And remember her character. She didn't trust God, really trust God, until she tried all these things, superstitions, except to get pregnant, except blamed her husband, everything but trust God until she tried everything else. Basically, she had stole her father's idol, hid it, and kept it until Jacob cleaned house before God called him and he cleaned all the idols out of his camp. Really, this girl was trouble. She may have been beautiful, but she was trouble. And she does not get the beautiful grave. She does not get the place of honor. She gets a rather common grave next to the road. Now we continue on in Genesis 48, verses 10 through 14. Now the eyes of Israel were dim for age, so he could not see, and he brought them near to him, and he kissed him and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, I have not thought to see your face, and lo, God has shown me also your seed. Joseph brought them out from between his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand towards Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand towards Israel's right hand, and he brought them near unto him. And Israel stretched his right hand and laid it upon Ephraim's hand that was younger, and his left hand upon Manasseh's hand, guiding his hands wittily. For Manasseh was the firstborn. Okay, so just like his father had got where he could not see, his father believed he was going to die, and we saw didn't die for many years later, actually. And, didn't die for many years later, actually, 38 years later before he died. But he thought when he got where he couldn't see, death was coming to him. And perhaps his sight got restored later, to some degree. But the same thing is happening to him, happened to his father. So now Joseph is now in the same position Jacob was. Joseph could try to take advantage of his father's poor eyesight, as Jacob had done to his own father. So there's a second chance being given here to Israel through his descendants to do things right. Because notice as mentioned earlier, he put the oldest ones first. Now notice how Joseph puts the oldest one on Israel's left hand, the greater blessing being on the right hand. The one that would get the blessing would be on the right hand, which was again the right to rule after, the right to rule over his brothers, and the lesser one on the left hand. That's the natural order. He's the older. But Israel crosses his arms, guides his hands winnowing, crosses his arms, and puts him so his left hand is upon the the younger, the elder, saying the younger is going to serve the elder is going to serve the younger. That's that's the significance of this, and Joseph understands that, and we're going to look upon this in Genesis 48 verses 15 through 18. Read the following. And he blessed Joseph and said, God, before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac did walk, the Father which fed me all my life long into this day. The angel which redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, let my name be upon them. In the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. Then when Joseph saw his father lay his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, it displeased him. He held up his father's hand and removed from Ephraim's hand unto Manasseh's head. Ephraim's head. And Joseph said to his father, not so far, for this is the firstborn. Put your right hand upon his head. Okay, so he's blessing, and Joseph, first of all, thinks his father's just made a mistake. Not so, it's just pleased him. And remember, it displeased Isaac that Jacob would rule over Esau because he favored Esau. Now, this may not be favoritism, but it is a reversal of the normal order. So again, opportunity again, giving these people a second chance to get it right, where God is reversing the order from normal because he is God and he can do so. We notice how he refers to God speaking, the names of the angels. The angel which redeemed him from all evil. The Malach Adonai, who we talked about before, is Messiah. Bless the lads. And he's putting his name on them. But it's putting his right hand, again, indicates the blessing, the right to rule is going to go to Ephraim, not Manasseh. And Joseph, this is not pleasing to Joseph. He thinks his father made a mistake, and it's not what his will is. And that's part of the test. We're going to continue on and see how this is handled. In Genesis 48, verses 19 through 20, we continue on Genesis 48, verses 19 through 22. And his father refused and said, I know it, my son, I know it. He shall become a people, and he shall be great. But truly his younger brother shall be greater, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. And he blessed them that day, saying, in thee shall Israel bless, saying, God make you as Ephraim and as Manasseh. He set Ephraim before Manasseh. And Israel said to Joseph, behold, I die, but God be with you and bring you again to the land of your fathers. Moreover, I've given you one portion above your brethren, which I took out of the hand of the Amorite with my sword and with my bow. Okay, so his father lets him know he knows it. This is on purpose, and it's not from him alone, it's from God. And notice how Joseph doesn't try to trick him, doesn't try to bring about his own will first, that Manasseh should be the one with the blessing, but be the greater one. Joseph passes the test his father failed. And really, his grandfather had failed, Isaac as well. He lets the will of God be. He submits to it. And notice this here about this portion. A portion above his brothers. Joseph's going to get the double portion, the birthright. And we'll talk about exactly why. We'll show exactly why in a little bit later. But Joseph's going to get the birthright. And we're going to see how this plays out now. This is not just Jacob talking, out of his head or whatever. These things indeed do come to pass. Everything he says concerning the sins of Israel will happen. And we begin here in Numbers 32, verses 32 through 33. We will pass over armed before the Lord in the land of Canaan, that the possession of our inheritance on this side be ours. And Moses gave it to them unto the children of Gad and the children of Reuben and unto half the tribe of Manasseh, the son of Joseph, the kingdom of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and the kingdom of Og, king of Bashan, the land with the cities thereof in the coast, even the cities of the country round about. Okay, so on now they're saying they'll pass over into the land of Canaan. They're not. They're on the other side. They're on the east side of the Jordan. And this inheritance is Gad's and Reuben's and half the tribe of Manasseh. But it's getting an equal size portion with Gad and Reuben. We'll look at that in a moment. Okay. So they're getting it. So Manasseh has land on the east side of the Jordan. Half of the tribe is settled over there, is getting after their inheritance. And where? In the kingdom of Gog, of Sihon, king of the Amorites. Remember, it's the land of the Amorites. That's that extra portion. That's part of that extra portion that Joseph's descendants, Manasseh and Ephraim, are going to get above their brothers. Now, we continue on here. In Joshua 17, we read some more about this. And Joshua spoke to the house of Joseph, even to Ephraim and Manasseh, saying, "You're a great people, have great power. You should not have one lot only." Now we're talking about the division of the land on the west side of the Jordan River. They're not going to have one lot. They're going to have two lots. Okay. One for Ephraim, one for Manasseh. Why? They're from Joseph, the house of Joseph. Joseph's been given the double portion. Now Manasseh is going to have twice as much as Ephraim, a double portion. He's the older son. Jacob said nothing about the birthright. It's about the blessing, the right to rule. And Ephraim is where later Samaria will be at. When the kingdom split, the northern kingdom, Ephraim indeed rules over not just Manasseh, but also the others, and indeed becomes greater than Manasseh, in many ways, as far in terms of wealth and power, but not in terms of land, because Manasseh now had land on both sides of the Jordan, equal to Ephraim, but two parts, one east of the Jordan, one west. And if you ever mapped this out, West Manasseh and East Manasseh were only separated by the Jordan River, and next to them is Ephraim. So again, how they do that? Because their two plots are together, and they became two lots. They got two of the lots. Okay, and they're next to each other. So the words of Jacob concerning them came to pass. And this is how Jacob was able to do this. In Hebrews 11:21, verse 21. By faith, Jacob was dying, blessed both the sons of Joseph, and worshipped and leaning upon the top of his staff. Okay, God pulled him with his bed early. Apparently, he got all the way up, to do this blessing, leaning on top of his staff, and while he perhaps spoke some of the words or whatever. Not while he's laying their hands on them, obviously. But nonetheless, so this is not just Jacob speaking out of his head. This is God speaking through Jacob. The things that are going to come in the latter days. Things that are come when God brings about that promise. Brings them back into the promised land. And again, it all came to pass. Now we continue on in Genesis 40. And again, worth noting, nobody tried to circumvent the known will of God here. Nobody tried to make it happen on their own and take matters in their own hands. The test that Isaac and Jacob failed, Joseph and his sons passed. So in that regard, perhaps in some ways, learn from the mistakes of their father and redeemed him, and redeem and a bit of redemption there, giving a second chance and doing it right the second time. We continue on in Genesis 49, verses 1 through 4. And Jacob called his, we're look at some of these other sons, the first four, and get some in because there's something important about them in particular. Because we've only covered Joseph, one son. Now he's got 11 brothers, right? Jacob called his sons, said, "Gather yourselves together, and I tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. Gather yourselves together and hear me, you sons of Jacob. Hearken to Israel your father. Reuben, you're my firstborn, my might, the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity, and the excellency of power. Unstable as water, you shall not excel. Because you went into your father's bed and you defiled it. He went up into my couch." Okay. Paybacks are terrible. Reuben's now getting his. Reuben went into Bilhah, Jacob's wife, the handmaiden of Rachel. Rachel was trouble, and so was her handmaiden. And Reuben did this. Notice his father's bed. As far as couch. I mean, not just with his wife, but not just one of his wives, but right there in the bed of his own father. And he's unstable as water, and we've seen this. He does like try to protect Joseph, but he plans to sneak around. He's not strong about it at all. He's an example of weak leadership. And so because of that, he's not going to excel. And what that means in particular is he's the firstborn, and he should have the birthright. The right to rule should have been his. Dignity, excellency of power should have been his. But because of this, because of the trouble he brought his father, he's not going to, he lost it. Because remember, the point of the birthright, the right to rule, is to take care of those they're ruling over. Like Messiah is the good shepherd. He lays down his life for the sheep. The bad shepherds, use the sheep to take care of them. We're concerned about the sheep. You give them what they cut out of the sheep, but the good shepherd is taking care of the sheep. And Reuben, like Joseph had reported, about some of the sons of Jacob, was not sure himself to be a good shepherd. He offered his own son's lives instead of his. He was, again, weak leadership, unstable as water, up and down, not solid, can't rely on him, and lack of judgment, certain. We continue on Genesis 49, verses 5 through 7. We read about Simeon and Levi, because they're next. They're second and third born. Simeon and Levi are brethren. Instruments of cruelty they are in their habitations. O my soul, come now you not into their secret, unto their assembly, mine honor. Be you not united. For in their anger they slew a man, in their self-will they dig down a wall. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, in their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Okay, now these two work together. And what I talk about particularly is Shechem. This man who their sister, started with the mistakes with her being with the daughters of the land. She learned their ways. There's nothing indicating he raped her at all. In fact, everything indicates the other way around. That maybe she even initiated. And he wanted to do the right thing and marry her they hatched this plot and killed not just him and not just his father, who wanted him to marry, who want this marriage to go through for a totally bad reasons, not noble reasons at all, like Shechem. Okay, but they also killed the entire town. Well, how they do that? The town, they lived in a walled city. Well, that wall, they probably shut the gate, locked it while they're being circumcised, so they they want to attack them. And what they do, they undermined it literally. They got some of their servants and dug under there, so part of the wall fell down because the way they ground under it. And then they went there and killed everyone in it. And they brought much trouble to Jacob. Remember, he set up Sukkot. He was going to live near these people. He set up he built himself a house. The only time he did this the entire time in the promised land. He was ready to settle down, want to have peace and quiet. Instead, he ended up having to leave and everything else. And he never did have real peace in the promised land. So again, they haven't shown that they would use leadership in the right way. In fact, they would make terrible leaders. And it's worth noting, remember when Messiah trial was before Caiaphas was before Caiaphas and Annas, the high priests who were from the tribe of Levi. The chief priests who were from the tribe of Levi were in it. In fact, the Sadducees, by and large, were from the tribe of Levi. And who they plot with? They plot with Judas Iscariot. Iscariot means from Keriot, and Keriot was one of the cities of Simeon. So there's this plotting here. This goes all the way down to the time of Messiah and beyond. There's people out there who have all these conspiracy theories about Jewish people, blah blah blah. Well, not all Jewish people are involved in conspiracy theories, but these two certainly were. And there's probably some out there today who still scheme, and perhaps they're from these two tribes because that's what they're known for. And as a result, notice there's some little extra to them beyond Reuben. They're going to be spread out throughout Jacob and Israel. And why? So they won't be make it more difficult for them to get involved in these kind of plots and intrigues and carry out this kind of cruelty. So they've lost the leadership that the blessing could have been Simeon's. He was second. And after him would have been Levi. But the trouble they brought their father knocked him out as candidates for the blessing. Now we're going to continue in Genesis 49, verses 8 through 12. Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. Your hand shall be in the neck of your enemies. Your father's children shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you are gone up. He stooped down, he crouched the lion as an old lion. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, and a lawgiver from between his feet till Shiloh come. On them shall be the gathering of the people be. Binding his foe under the vine, and his ass's colt upon the choice vine. He washed his garments in wine, his clothes in the blood of grapes. His eyes shall see red wine, his teeth white, shall be red with wine, his teeth white with milk. Okay, so let's talk about it. There's a lot to say about this here. Now, Judah's going to get the scepter, the right to rule. The blessing is going to fall on Judah. Why? Judah had done nothing to bring trouble to his father, except for the matter of Joseph. We'll talk about that later. Okay, but even then, Judah delivered Joseph from death. Remember, Levi and Simeon wanted to kill him, and he talked him into sell him instead. He offered up his own life to protect Benjamin's. He offered me that he would bear his father's curse forever if he did not return him. He in every way, at every turn, had showed himself to be the leader. So now the the blessing is going to stop on him, the right to rule. And notice there's some more aspects about him. We'll talk about the ruling first, then we'll get to the other aspects. A scepter shall not depart, the ruler shall not depart from Judah, that tribe, until Shiloh come. And notice the scepter, the king, not a judge, a king. There's a difference. There's differences. We've talked to them before. Okay. Until Shiloh come. What's Shiloh? Shiloh is rest. It's related to the word shalom. And it's referring to the messianic rest of when Messiah is reigning the earth. Okay. Until the day of rest, that 7,000-year period that's coming, comes, the king will always come from Judah. Now, there's the country of Israel, but there's no king. There's a prime minister. No king has ever been from either tribe but Judah. And they've all come to the line of David. Well, this ties us back to that lion's whelp. The lion of the tribe, a reference to the lion of the tribe of Judah. Of course, a lion's often viewed as a regal animal. But also notice, upon the prey, it's also a dangerous animal. Don't rouse him. So this is the aspect of war that we see here about Judah we've not seen with the other two. He's not using intrigue. He's actually going into battle. Okay. And the gathering of the people will be to Judah because Messiah will be in Judah, in Jerusalem. So it's talking about that Messiah is also going to come from this tribe. And there's some more about that. His colt to the vine is ass's colt. What Messiah ride on the triumphant entry? A donkey's coat. A donkey, the foal of a donkey, a coat. So they'll see a problem. They say it's a donkey. It says a coat in every place. Well, a colt is a young donkey. Baby, young donkey is a coat. Is a donkey still, not a problem. And that's the same kind of thing here. Okay. A little clarification. Not just a foal, that could be a horse, but it's a donkey's colt with the choice vine. And notice he's going to wash him. Again, that vine perhaps reminds us of the Last Supper, the bread and the wine. Okay. But there's another implication here. Washed his garments in wine, his clothes in the blood of grapes. And we're going to look at an application of that in a moment here. But it's again talking about the particular Messiah coming in battle, like when he's in Basra where the Antichrist sends out perhaps 2 or 3 or 4 million troops to wipe out the Jewish people, the people who are hiding out in Basra, which means sheep pen. It's also known as Petra. And Messiah all by himself takes them out. And his clothes are just covered in blood like someone had been stomping grapes. Red with wine, well, also your eyes can be red with anger. And the wine is the wine of the wrath of God. That's stomping that out. He stomps out the wine press of the wrath of God is stomped out by Messiah. So, in the teeth is white as milk, teeth devoured, but it's also that white speaks of righteousness. It's a righteous anger. It's a righteous. He's doing this to deliver the people of Israel from certain annihilation. Will be. Now that starts coming out here. In these words of Balaam we find in Numbers 24 verses 17 through 19. I see him, but not now. I shall see him, but not now. I shall behold him, but not near. For there comes a star of Jacob, a scepter that shall rise of Israel, and shall smite the corners of Moab, and destroy the children of Sheth. And Edom shall be a possession. Seir shall also be a possession, but Israel shall do valiantly. Out of Jacob shall come the he that shall have dominion, and destroy him that remains of the city. Okay, so again, perhaps a little bit in here. That star, the scepter. Well, it's going to come out Jacob. Well, okay, but Judah is one of the tribes of Israel. That's where it's going to have to come from. And this is again talking about Messiah and when the last days. And we looked at that, and we looked at this possession. Seir. Remember, Medom and Seir was actually from one of the Canaanite tribes, and they became one people. Esau and Edom is used of the sins of Esau plus Seir together, and then Seir is also a possession. And we read about these, read about how when Messiah comes, their land is going to be destroyed like Babylon, like and the same is true for Moab. Okay, and the men and the women and children will be brought back and brought into Israel. They're gonna be absorbed into Israel, become part of Israel, but they're not going to be, but they're going to be as strangers in Israel. They're going to be an inheritance in whatever tribe they're in. But the men of Israel, just as the priest, Levites will be the priest of God to Israel. The men of Israel were told to be the priest of God to the rest of the world. And these other people are going to take care of their farms and stuff. So that's what's going to happen here. That's what's referring to. It's all occurring with the Messiah. And he that remains in the city, not just about Moab and these places, but particularly is a reference, especially, I should say, to Babylon, which can be completely destroyed in a way. It's not destroyed today. There's another city right near it. There's a park there. But it's all going to be turned, the whole area, it's not just the city of Babylon, it's Babylonia, the land of Babylon around it. It's going to be turned into a big wildlife reserve, the home of nothing. There's nothing there but jackals and bitterns and whatever. If you think of these wildlife reserves here in the U.S. where there's no towns in them, that's what's going to happen to the area of Babylon. So this is plainly showing that Messiah, that was a reference to Messiah. Jacob had already framed that with his words. Now, we continue on in Joshua 19 through 20, in Joshua 19, verse 6 through 9. And we're going to look at his other thing about that special extra thing. Not just you're not going to get to rule, you're going to be scattered among your brethren. He says to Simeon and Levi. We're going to look at Simeon first here. In Joshua, again, 19, verse 6 through 9. Beth-Lebaoth, Sharuhin, 13 cities and their villages. Ain, Iman, Ether, Ashan, 4 cities and their villages. All of those are round about the city about these cities to Baal Athbeer, Ramoth of the south. This is the inheritance of the tribe of children of the Simeon according to their fathers. Out of the portion of the children of Judah was the inheritance of the children of Simeon. For the part of the children of Simeon of Judah was too much for him. Therefore, the children of Simeon had their inheritance and the inheritance of them. Okay, so when Joshua divided the land up, Simeon did not get a portion for himself, but Judah's, this really large one, it was too big. But notice something about it could just say, list the cities, start them above there. We aren't going to the names of the cities today, but it could have said 17 cities and their villages because they're not even, because 13 of those cities are near each other and the other 4 are off away from those. And notice their villages. They're not getting land around there. Remember, and we're talking about this before in the Bible, a city is a wall, has a wall around it. The Torah makes this very plain. A village does not have a wall. Okay. So this is all they have. This is all, and they're scattered and they're not near each other. And not even that, they're all inside Judah's part. They don't have a contiguous place of their own. Now Judah does. He's just got these cities dotted, but the land around them, around these cities and the villages associated with that city, that'd be like suburbs today is what I was talking about. Little villages outside the walls of these cities. Well, the farmland around there belongs to Judah. Now, but Levi, it goes even further. And we're going to look at that here in Joshua 21, verses 3 through 7. The children of Israel gave unto the Levites out of their inheritance, at the commandment of the Lord, these cities and their suburbs. The lot came out of the cities of the Kohathites. The children of Aaron, the priests, which were the Levites, had by lot out of the tribe of Judah and out of the tribe of Simeon and out of the tribe of Benjamin 13 cities. And the rest of the children of Kohath had by lot out of the families of Ephraim, out of the tribe of Dan, out of the half tribe Manasseh 10 cities. And the children of Geshon had by lot of the families of the tribe of Issachar, out of the tribe of Asher, and out of the tribe of Naphtali, out of the tribe of Manasseh in Bashan 13 cities. And the children of Merari by their families, out of the tribe of Reuben, out of the tribe of Gad, and out of the tribe of Zebulun, 12 cities. Okay, so what do we see here? That the Levites, two outstanding things here. Their cities are really scattered, way more scattered than, I mean, Simeons were somewhat near each other. They were inside the, and notice even out of those of Simeon, some of them have been given to the Levites. Okay, so but the Levites are scattered all over the country, all over Israel. Simeon scattered, but part of being scattered throughout Israel among the children of Israel is about Levi. And the next outstanding thing is, notice, and their suburbs, not their villages. Now, the suburb we're told in the Torah is you have a walled city, you have the wall, and then out about a kilometer or a half mile, all around it is a little green zone. You can't build anything there. It's for, and we're told it's for the cattle of the city, and some milk cows and horses and things like that can graze, because back then people had to have that. They didn't have cars or whatever, right? Until relatively modern times in American cities, lots were typically 4 acres inside a city, like there was a little mini farm going on there because people had to have them. That's that's how the Great Chicago Fire was allegedly started by Miss O'Leary's cow kicking over a lantern into the hay and setting the the barn on fire. Then well, that was typical until modern times of cities to have some sort of livestock inside the city, while also some grazing land out around it. That's what it's about. But there's no villages. They're confined to living inside these walls of these cities all over the place. And they're scattered all over. They're not near each other. And again, makes it a lot harder to carry out form these conspiracies and carry them out. So Jacob, these paybacks that's coming to Levi and Simeon aren't just them not getting, that's coming upon their descendants as well, in the form of this being scattered, again, because they're prone to making these kind of conspiracies and plots and whatever, and doing violence to people unjustly. It was unjust what they did to Shechem. And it was very unjust what they did to the people who were totally innocent of the matter. Now, so we've talked about Joseph. We talked about Joseph through his two sons. We looked at his two sons in particular, and we've talked about the 4 oldest sons and how Judah ends up with the blessing, the right to rule, because he did nothing to to bring trouble and disgrace to his father, and showed himself they would take care of his brethren. Because that's the point of the rule, of having the right to rule, is ruling not to oppress those under you, but to take care of them, like a shepherd taking care of a sheep. But now we're going to look at these other 7 tribes that are left. Zebulun shall dwell by the haven of the sea. He shall be a haven for ships, and his border shall be unto Zidon. Issachar is a crouching ass bearing down between 2 burdens. And he saw that rest was good, and the land was pleasant. He bowed his shoulder to bear, and he became a servant under tribute. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent of the way, an adder in a path that bites the horse's heels, so the rider shall fall backward. I have waited for your salvation, O Lord. Okay, Zebulun is going to be over by the sea, Sidon. And if you remember the promised land, the greater promised land, the border, and even in the part that Israel uh, will occupy in the future, goes all the way up goes all the way up to a little bit north of Damascus, and includes the entire country of today, Lebanon, where Sidon was. So he's in ships. He's got these coastals. That haven for ships could refer to the area of Beirut, but refers mainly to Haifa, the only natural port on the land of Israel. So he's gonna so it talks about them being seafaring people, and then and engaged, of course, in that kind in the that kind of trade. And indeed, it comes to pass. I don't have time today, but I could show you how each of these come to pass, like like I did as I gave an example earlier. Issachar. Well, let's just talk about. Right, think about an animal carrying burdens. Well, talking about like you're talking about like think of the teamsters, which were people with teams of horses with pulling wagons, and later referred to truckers. So they're in this industry. There's a little bit of thing here. Fully loaded, two burdens, okay, and they're in. There's an indication of them being in the industry of transporting things around, but also of being merchants, okay, and a servant under tribute. Well, everyone knows rich people out of necessity pay more taxes than poor people. They're put under tribute. They don't really put people under too much tribute who don't have nothing. When you see one nation put under tribute, usually that another nation that put under tribute has something. And it, but the land where he is good and pleasant. Okay, the rest was good and the land was pleasant. And you could think of perhaps California, for example, here in America. I mean, I've just been to a little bit of it, but a friend of mine drove over all of it extensively on a vacation. He told me every square inch of that land is beautiful. But what's the problem? It's heavily taxed, except under tribute. Why? Because of the people, and they're involved in all kinds of commerce there. And really, they've made a mess of things. And perhaps Issachar is in that same is kind of in that same position. Bow the shoulder to the bear. We kind of implies workaholic or just having to work all the time. You know, Boy, to pay that tribute. Okay, and it's one of the reasons why people are fleeing California. We kind of got a similar. It went down. It went down the last census from its population, which I think is the first time it's ever done that, because people are finding the taxation everything unbearable. So, kind of a similar picture. Pleasant land, but but working yourself to death for commerce. Daniel and Dan, we see the same thing. We see something similar here with Dan. I mean, Dan, we see something different. We're going to see how it fits him. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent in the way, an adder in the path that bites the horse's heel. So his rider shall fall backward. I have waited for your salvation, O Lord. First thing we notice about Dan is he's a judge. And you hear about Jewish lawyers and stuff. Well, a good chance, back somewhere back there, they got this ancestry from Dan. Many of the judges were Dan. In fact, the last judge in the period of judges was from the tribe of Dan, Samson. And he's going to judge the other tribe. He's going to, so it speaks of being involved in the legal process, in the legal in the law industry at large, if you will. But there's another aspect to Dan, and notice this military aspect of him as well. And what does it speak of? This speaks of like special ops type people who rely on surprise. look, the horse is bigger than the snake. The rider's bigger, okay, than this adder. In fact, the horse could crush the adder's head with his hoof. He saw it, but he's in the way. He's hiding on the side. He's going to bite the horse's heels. And why? His goal's the rider. And so again, think of surprise attacks, small units, black ops, special ops type thing. And today there are indeed units like that in Israel. And there's this tribe. And notice, I wait for your salvation. There's some salvation and the salvation is connected to Dan, because what we find in the 144,000, the tribe of Dan is missing. It's not there. Why? Judge. No more judgment from God. Salvation brings an end to judgment. Those who are not saved are going to have to stand before the Father and be judged by him and condemned. But Dan's perhaps also involved in law enforcement and those kind of things. Again, I could show this. There's one more interesting thing about Dan. We talked about that military aspect. Homer, people would say, but the Greeks don't actually have an H, but we'll go with Homer, said the Spartans were a group he called Danoi, literally the children of Dan. So they moved to Greece from another country, moved into this valley out on the Peloponnesian island, on the peninsula. Moved there from another place into this valley there and start the city of Sparta. According to him, the Spartans weren't native to Greece. They were the children of Dan. And they were known for these kind of tactics we're talking about. So, just a little thought there for you. And I've shown it before in one of my blog posts about Greece rising, except there's a connection between Dan and Greece. That thread between Dan and Greece and the Greeks continually through the Bible. Now we continue on to the history of Israel, I should say. Now we continue on in Genesis 49, verse 12 through 21. We're about these other three tribes. Gad, the troops shall overcome him. He shall overcome at the last. Out of Asher, his bread shall be fat, and he shall yield royal dainties. Naphtali is a hind feet loose. He gives goodly words. Okay. Gad means a troop's coming, if you remember. A troop, literally. As Leah said, a troop's coming, okay? And she's in that breeding contest with her sister. But this speaks of the general army, okay? The regular army, not necessarily special ops or anything like that, okay? But another army may overcome him, but he will overcome at the last. The army of Israel will prevail in the end. Yeah, they've had times where with the judgment of God and they're pushed out of the land, etc. But at the end days, in many of them, in Gad, many of them are given to this type of occupation of being not your do my 3 years as it is currently in Israel, stint and off to do my other business, but they're given to being the lifelong military men who make a career of that. Now, Asher, the bread, speaks, of course, of bacon, but also reminds us of what? Reminds us of wheat, particularly. And indeed, his land is the land of Asher is where a large part of the wheat crop grew. And of course, back in the day, it wasn't like, also made bread, royal dainties, made those, not just regular bread for everyone, but also those specialty things for the wealthy. Okay. So, an excellent, someone who can do beyond just the regular, make me some pita so I can, make myself a little sandwich. We're not talking about that. We're talking about people who would make things like sugar and the yolk, goat, the gun yolk. I said that wrong, but anyways, literally instead of the Garden of Eden, kind of like jelly donuts. But that's the kind of thing we're talking about. But it's association with agriculture, particularly farming, particularly grains, and using those products to what feed people, the food industry. Now, Naphtali is a hind let loose. He gives good words. A hind is a we might say a doe in America, but it's some of a wild doe let loose. It's running out wild now. Now, Naphtali was part of Galilee. Where Galilee in that land here in America, there's a group decided to make a passion thing. They went to Israel first, went to where Nazareth was, looked around, and they went around the U.S. looking for the place that was most similar, and they settled in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, because that gave it that was the most similar looking. And indeed, Nazareth is surrounded by 14 mountains, one across the Jezreel Valley, Armageddon, the other 13 are all around it. And we're talking about hunters here, hillbillies, okay? They're living up in the hills and they give goodly words. And so what we're talking about, authors, people writing music, musicians, etc. Okay. Those sort of things. So, we're talking about people, like, again, hill people here, but also much literature, in America's came from the hill people, and basically most of our music you can trace back to them as well. You know, it, so there's that aspect there of Naphtali, of those kind of things. And again, I could show you where a lot of these things came to pass. Okay, but they live in a little bit of a wild area, not really suitable for farming, so they occupy themselves with other things. Now we continue on in Genesis 49, 22 through 27, and we're going to look at Joseph again, and we're going to see why he's getting the double blessing, not the 10 in front of him, not the 10 in front of him who had to go through first. That's not just favoritism, as Jacob's been known to be prone to, but there's actually a just reason for him being given this double portion. Here's where we read it. Here's what we read. Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well, whose branches run over the wall. The archers have sorely grieved him and shot him and hated him. But his bow, a bow and strength, the arms of his arm were made ready by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob, from whom is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. Even the God of your father, who has helped me. And by the Almighty, you shall bless you with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies underneath, blessings of the breast and the blessing of the womb. The blessing of your father has prevailed above the blessing of your progenitors of the uttermost bound of the everlasting hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph, upon the crown of him that was separate from his brethren. And Benjamin shall raven as a wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey. At night he shall divide the spoil. Okay, so we're going to talk about Joseph first here. He's a fruitful bough. I mean, he's by the well watered. And Joseph has been fruitful in everything he's done, as we've seen. He gave his father, he's always shown himself trustworthy. He gave his father an honest report about his brothers. Potiphar puts everything in his hands. Even when he's in jail, the jailer puts everything in Joseph's hands. Pharaoh puts everything in Joseph's hands, and everyone prospers. He's a fruitful bough. But what's the problem? The archers, his brothers, are the problem. They're those archers that shot him and hated him. And it doesn't mean Benjamin below. It means the other 10 who were older than him. Benjamin did none of these things. But notice at the end, he abode in strength. He got the upper hand over them, or God gave him the upper hand. It's through all God, mighty God. He didn't scheme himself like Jacob had tried to do. He didn't try to make it happen on his own. God had brought it about. Okay. And it's God of Jacob that is the shepherd and the stone of Israel. And that would be Messiah. Well, there's no coincidence that Messiah's earthly father, the one who people suppose his father, was named Joseph, because he too was faithful with what he was entrusted with. So God's going to help him and bless him. And notice the blessings of your father Jacob rebel over the blessing of his progenitors under the uttermost bound of the everlasting hills. What's Jacob talking about there? He's talking about Abraham and Isaac. Abraham walked the breadth of the breadth and the length of the land, of the promised land. But as we saw, his fortunes came and went. Isaac's fortunes came and went. He was great, but then he's not, is so great. Jacob himself's fortunes came and went. Like where were all the servants he had before when he came into Egypt? They're gone, right? I mean, okay, he doesn't have all that as much livestock as he had. His fortunes were down, and the drought didn't help. But now in Egypt, he's had good. He's had better than he's had the things his father's never has had. He's had peace and prosperity. And we shall see great respect there. And he's in the land of Goshen. Again, that part of the greater promised land that went by the brook of Egypt. And he's covering parts of the promised land that Abraham and Isaac never really went to. Abraham walked the breadth and the width and the breadth of Canaan, but not the whole greater thing. But Jacob's been has prevailed above them in every way. And his last 17 years have been good. Remember, all these others were under taxation, but him and his family is under not taxation, but being taken care of by the government, okay, through Joseph, all right? And their wealth, and so he's had peace and prosperity above that which his fathers had. Now, he's saying that peace, that prosperity is going to come upon the head of Joseph. That double portion. And we mentioned before, merchants, Manasseh and Ephraim, known for merchants and known for making, for Ephraim, particularly for wealth, okay? And why? Because he is separated from his brethren. The purpose for the double portion is to take care of your brethren. Like example, if one gets in trouble, and to redeem them, to rescue them, etc. What the 10 brothers older than him do? They put him in a well. Some of them wanted to kill him. Some put him in a well. Some, one in effort to at least spare his life, sold him into slavery. So the double portion, all 10 of them forfeited the double portion when they did that. Joseph had done nothing wrong at all to forfeit it. And in fact, had shown in every way he would use it for what it was meant to be used for, to take care of his brethren. So that's why it goes down Joseph through Manasseh and Ephraim. Now, lastly, we got Benjamin. Brave as a wolf, coming in and just attacking and destroying. He's going to devour and prey in the morning. At night, he's going to divide the spoil. We're talking about it's all over in a day. This guy is a beast on the battlefield. Okay? And so we see about his descendants. And we see it, towards the end of the book of Judges, every left-handed, many of the judges were from Benjamin. Every left-hander in Benjamin that's mentioned, whose tribe's given, is from Benjamin. Benjamin alone had people who were ambidextrous. Not only are they ambidextrous, they could shoot a bow. Like a sling with either hand and hit a hair's breadth at like 200 yards. Okay. And because of that, they have this kind of it can be kind of like a wolf. They can kind of go crazy on that, A wolf, thing about a wolf is sometimes it'll kill more than it needs to sometimes. It just gets caught up in the moment of killing, basically. It may only willing to eat one sheep, but they'll kill six just because because it's hunger, and five because it's fun. Five more because it's fun. Devour the prey. Over the night, divide the spoil. Quick victory. And this, again, that military aspect. But this is not necessarily like those night ops special force we talked about, but more like your elite units, like the Marines. Well, the Marines in general, to me, but the Green Beret, the Green Berets, Delta Force, those kind of things. The American, and Israel has equivalent things like those. And this is the tribe of Benjamin, and and we see this through his ascendants, how it can be a good and bad. Like Paul, the thing about him is, again, that determination to win. Well, we see that with the apostle Paul, Shaul, who's from the tribe of Benjamin. But the problem can be, he can get himself wrapped up in pride over his accomplishments. And that's why he's given a thorn in the flesh. He gets all this revelation. And we have to speculate. He says he was given a thorn in the flesh. And what that is, a messenger of Satan to cause him trouble. For what purpose? So he wouldn't get puffed up in pride over the revelations God gave him. But that dogged determination is a characteristic of the tribe of Benjamin. And again, speaks of a military, but not just your average foot soldiers, okay? These kind of, not black ops necessarily, but these more elite units who are just a beast on the battlefield. And take care of that attitude with them in everything they do. Okay. So now he's finished, and he's framed the history of all all the tribes of Israel and the people who come from those tribes as well. They're going to have these characteristics. And we continue on in 49, verse 28 through 33. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is that their father spoke to them and blessed them. Everyone according to the blessing he blessed them. And he charged them and said to them, I regard my people, bury my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite. And the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham brought with Ephron the Hittite, for a possession of a burying place. And they buried Abraham and Sarah's wife, and they buried Isaac and Rebekah, and I buried Leah. And the purchase of the field of that cave therein is from the children of Heth. And when Jacob had an indignant of commanding his sons, he got his feet in his bed, he opened the ghost, and was gathered unto his people. Okay, I'm gonna bring this out again before I continue on here. That Jacob is, notice those things I talked about, are what shall befall you in the last days. He's also known as Israel, and sometimes he's called that in what we've been reading. These are the last days of Israel. They go all the way through to Messiah reigns, and even then, but it'll affect which land people get, etc. Okay, he's framing their entire history. But now he's finished with this. It's time for him to die. He knows this, and notice he wants to be buried in Machpelah, the place of honor. And notice who's already buried in the place of honor. Leah. Not Rachel, who he favored, whom man favored, but Leah, whom God favored. Remember, we saw Leah with her children, the way she named them, everything. She continually relied and trusted on God. She didn't get into superstition, all this stuff like her sister, didn't caught, wasn't involved with messing with idols or anything else. Leah was faithful to God through her whole life. Every time you see her, she's faithful to God. She was God's choice. And she's the one who got buried in the place of honor. Not Rachel, who was man's choice, the man being Jacob. Jacob looked on the outside, but God looked at the heart. Now, so now he wants to be buried there. And why is it? Because remember what God had said to him. We saw last week. We saw a little while back before he went into Egypt. He planned to go see Joseph, and he's going to just return home and die or whatever. And God said, "No, I want you to stay there." And he told him Joseph would close his eyes in death, and he would return. Jacob would return to the land of Egypt. Well, he realizes he's going to die in Egypt. So now he wants him to go bring his body and bury him back in the land of Canaan in the place of honor in Machpelah. And notice this about Machpelah, purchased from the children of Heth. And we're talking this before. Heth literally means terror. Hittite or children of Heth means terrorist. Okay. In the day in Israel, so Israel also today is having to repurchase the land of Israel from the terrorists, as they are doing now with those terrorists from Gaza. Now we're looking. Now we're the last chapter of Genesis, chapter 50, and we're starting verses 1-6, and we're going to look at. Jacob can't make them do this. We're going to look at their response to his command and to his dying in general. And Joseph fell on his father's face and wept him and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants and physicians to embalm his father, and the physicians embalmed Israel. And 40 days were fulfilled for him. So were fulfilled the days of those which are embalmed. And the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. In the days of his mourning were past, Joseph spoke unto the house of Pharaoh, saying, If I have now found grace in your eyes, speak, I pray you, in the ears of Pharaoh, saying, My father made me to swear, saying, Lo, I die. In my grave which I dig for me in the land of Canaan, there you shall bury me. Now therefore let me go up, I pray you, and bury my friend, I will come again. And Pharaoh said, Go up and bury your father according as he made you swear. Okay, Joseph's weeping. He's the one that closed his eyes, as God said he would. Close his eyes. When you die, sometimes your eyes are open. The custom was to say, close the eyelids. But now notice this thing he does. He hasn't been bombed. He's having him made into a mummy. That's what it's referring to here. He's being embalmed just like the pharaohs of Egypt were. And the Egyptians are mourning for him 70 days. Those 40 days, and it's the same process of the Pharaoh. Mourning for 70 days. And of course, that 70 reminds us of what? Joseph counting Jacob himself, the men, 70 men, Jacob and his descendants, counting Joseph and his two sons. The men were 70 in Egypt. But that harkened back to Genesis 10, the nations, the nations that are listed there, you count them up, they're 70. It speaks of the Gentiles, okay, of a salvation. So it's about not just the Jewish people mourning, but the Gentiles as well, okay. And the Egyptians, of course, are Gentiles. There's a little prophetic picture there. But the important thing is they're giving him the royal treatment in his death. They're doing everything he says. They did. Now that's before Joseph asked Pharaoh. And Pharaoh, he promises to come back. And Pharaoh, right away, says, go do it. Because he knows Joseph will keep his word to come back. Joseph has been faithful in everything he's ever done. And Pharaoh didn't want him breaking that either by not, doing what we saw earlier. He swore he wants him to be able to keep his oath because that's why he likes Joseph in the first place, because he can trust him, and he has wisdom from God and character from God as well. We continue on here in Genesis 50 and verses 7 through 11. And Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his house, and all the elders of the land of Egypt. And all the house of Joseph, his brother, and his father's house, only their little ones and their flocks and their herds, they left in the land of Goshen. And they went with him both chariots and horsemen, and it was a very great company. And they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond Jordan, and they mourned there with a great and very sore lamentation. And he made a mourning for his father for 7 days. When the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning on the floor of Atad, they said, this is a grievous mourning to the Egyptians. Therefore, the name of it is called Abel Mizraim, which is beyond Jordan. Okay, so he's taking them up to bury him and put him in this, but Pharaoh doesn't go himself. But notice he sends this great procession with him. And this is exactly what they did when the Pharaoh died. The Pharaoh wouldn't be there because, well, he was dead, right? But the servants would, the elders of his house, and the elders of the land of Egypt. They're given, again, Jacob the royal treatment. He was greatly respected. And Joseph, his brothers also. And when they get there, and they come in this great company, and when they get there, and they mourn this place for 7 days. And we've seen this before, like Noah mourned for Methuselah 7 days. Then the flood came. We saw this. They name it the mourning of the Egyptians. Now, there's something important right there. They've been out of the land, the children of Israel, for 17 years now. And the Canaanites, who they lived among before, don't recognize them. It's not the mourning of the Hebrews, it's the mourning of the Egyptians. Yes, there's Egyptians there, but it's not an Egyptian who died, although they saw the mummy, undoubtedly think that. But what's this tell us? It tells us that the children of Israel are being assimilated into Egyptian culture. Joseph obviously dressed like an Egyptian before, but now the entire Jewish people, the people of Israel, are also being assimilated into the nations. And the Canaanites cannot tell them. And indeed, they dress the same. They're dressing. They dress. They were dressing the same way they did before. They'd recognize them right away. They're dressing like the Egyptians. The only real difference between them and the Egyptians, as far as physical goes, is circumcision. And well, the Canaanites can't see that; it's covered up. And there may be some difference in their diet. Perhaps Abraham did walk in the commandments and statutes of God, even though they weren't given formally until Moses later. And perhaps they only ate clean meat, but again, the Canaanites can't see that either particularly. And this brings us to this important thing here about Israel being this tendency for Jews to self-assimilate. The Egyptians didn't make them do this. They gave them the land of Goshen, let them sit in there, as we saw here, let them be off in a separate place, doing this occupation that they didn't like in the first place. But the Jewish people have a tendency to want to fit in with the nations they're at. And that's why they were given these things as signs to keep them from fitting in. Um, uh, among Jews, there's a saying, rabbis particularly, it's not so much we kept the Sabbath as the Sabbath kept us. The Sabbath kept them from being like everyone else. Everyone else off worshiping God on Sunday, they're worshiping on the Sabbath, Friday night, Saturday day. Except circumcision. And of course, you tell someone if you tell someone you don't eat pork, and before Muslims start showing up in this country, people just assumed automatically you were Jewish, but it could be for a lot of other reasons, like your heart doctor told you not to. It's the number one thing to not eat if you want to not have a heart attack. And that's why all this turkey bacon and turkey sausage and stuff have sprung up as an alternative to pork. But people automatically first thought, oh, you must be Jewish. Outside of America, people are routinely circumcised in the hospital unless they opt out. Most states are opt out. Some are opt in now. And the only ones who really opted out were the Jewish. So Moyel, so they could have a brisk, and the Moyel could show up. So the Moyel could show up and have a little party and circumcise their son. So the whole community saw he was circumcised. Okay. So they wouldn't have to be inspecting him when he's a grown man to see if he's circumcised. So, but in America, it's not so distinguishing. But the Sabbath is very distinguishing, okay? People come to the conclusion, again, there's not the only ones, the Seventh-day Adventists and stuff. But those three things together kind of separate them and keep them separate from other people, no matter how much they try to assimilate. And indeed, we'll look at this in a future lesson. But God says, when I scatter you among all nations, you're going to have, you're not, no matter how hard you try, you're not going to be able to assimilate. You're going to have trouble. And it's been true. Jews have lived in places like the Falasha Mura in Ethiopia, have lived there since at least 400 or 500 BC, 400 BC minimum, or 500 BC, somewhere there minimum. Okay. They've lived there all that time. And they're called, Falasha literally means foreigner. Most people couldn't tell them apart from the other Ethiopians, got the same skin color, except. But the Ethiopians have never let them forget that they're not Ethiopians. In Italy, and in France, there's been the same thing. Now in Greece, a different attitude. They consider them the holy people, and despite how assimilated they became, they gave them special protection and stuff, and that's one reason why they had such trouble with the Nazis. The Greeks did, but the point here being, even though they lived there among them and left all these signs of Jewish presence in Greek, they may have dressed like Greeks, but never could totally assimilate because of these things. But they may look like it to the average person, and that's what's going on here. The assimilation, this attempt to assimilate into the Gentiles and look like them, has already begun, and that pattern will continue until Messiah comes and Israel's regathered. We continue here in Genesis 50 and verses 12 through 16. In our last section, we wrap up our series here. And his sons did according as he commanded him. His sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the land of the field of Machpelah, which Abraham brought for a field in possession of the burying place of Ephron the Hittite before Mamre. And Joseph returned to Egypt, he and his brethren, all that were with him, to bury his father, after he buried his father. And when Joseph's brethren saw their father was dead, they said, Joseph peradventure will hate us and will certainly repay us of all the evil we did unto him. Okay, now he's in the cave of Machpelah. Well, where was he before? All this mourning was where? On the other side of the Jordan. In the land that later would be Manasseh's. Okay? They didn't go the direct route. Joseph took them up to the land. Remember, he said he took that land from the Amorite with his sword. Jacob had his father. He took him to that place first, and then come in. So what are they doing? They come in. They're crossing over the Jordan. again, like when they returned from Egypt, they're going to cross over the Jordan into the land of Canaan, and they're going to the place bought for possession from the Hittite from the terrorist. Okay, so remember, Hittite means terrorists, children of terror, and now they buried. Now his brothers are worried. Again, this is a story of redemption as well. Remember, Esau said when after Jacob had stolen the blessing from him, although really it wasn't his to be stolen. Isaac should have been trying to give it to Esau in the first place. But nonetheless, before his anger cooled down, he said, "When my father's about to die, and when he dies, I'm going to kill my brother." Well, for 17 years, despite all this prosperity they've been living under this fear that Joseph only showing them kindness and mercy because their father's there, for the sake of their father. But now he's gone, and they know they deserve to be repaid for what they've done. And they've lived under fear for 17 years. The day was coming. Paybacks are terrible. They saw what happened to their father, and that day was coming for them, and now it has arrived. Now we're as we continue in Genesis 50 verses 16 through 21, we'll see how if they were justified in their fears. And they sent a messenger to Joseph saying, "Your father did command before he died, saying, I say unto Joseph, forgive, I pray you now, the trespass of your brethren and their sin, for they did unto you evil. And now we pray, forgive the trespass of the servants of the Lord, of the God of your father." And Joseph wept when they spoke unto him. His brothers also went and fell down before his face, and behold, we be your servants. And Joseph said unto them, "Fear not, am I in the place of God? As for you, you thought evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring to pass that it is this day to save much people alive. Now, therefore, fear not, I will nourish you and your little ones." He covered them and spoke kindly unto them. Okay, without exaggeration, the 10 brothers of Joseph are the majority of the Jewish people, of the people of Israel. You have the one that stayed loyal to him, that did him no wrong, Benjamin. Joseph here, again, the son of Joseph, son of suffering. Joseph here is a picture of Messiah. To forgive, the Father commands the Son that they be forgiven. And Messiah says, what? Forgive them not. They know what they do. He gave Messiah for the forgiveness of sin, so they can become the servants of the God. Whether we're serving God or we're serving the devil, there's no in between. No one's really living for themselves. They might delude themselves into believing. We're either Satan's servant or God's servant. And the God's servant, we have to have our sin, our sin. We have to confess our sin as they are doing, and ask for forgiveness, and we'll be forgiven. And that's what Joseph does. Am I in the place of God? And notice they bow down as Israel will do before Messiah. When they say to him, Baruch Hashem Adonai, blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord. And he rescues them from the armies of the Antichrist. They will all bow down to him. And we're told in Ezekiel 20, they'll all the rest of the Jews from all over the world will be gathered from all over the earth and brought to the wilderness. And 9 out of 10 who go in are not coming out. He's going to destroy every rebel from among them. So all the Jewish people will bow to him. All of Israel will be saved in that day. And just as the people of Israel, the majority of them, remember, there was a crowd weeping for Messiah. It wasn't a fickle crowd that was out there cheering for him on Palm Sunday, as people call it, and then crying, crucify him. and they weren't schizophrenic. They were two crowds. They weren't schizophrenic. Because later in Luke, you find they're mourning for him. There's a crowd mourning for him, wailing for him. Like Benjamin wailed when Joseph was taken away. So also some of the Jewish people wailed when Messiah was taken away. But the rest of them, they meant to do evil against him. But God brought the good. For what purpose? To save much people alive. It wasn't just the Jewish people who were saved. Remember his name. Zop, if I remember right. Zophnathpaniah. Savior of the world, it means. He saved the Egyptians. He saved all the places around there that relied on the Egyptians, that were affected by this famine, that relied on the Egyptians, that came to Egypt for food. And so also the evil that we talked about earlier that was plotted against Messiah and carried out. They meant evil against him, but they brought it for good. But God brought it for good to save many people. And now, after Messiah comes back, and what? He's going to nourish them and their little ones. And this comforting and being spoken kindly reminds us of the Holy Spirit, our comforter, as well. But yes, the day when Israel confessed its sin against Messiah and surrenders to him, it will be when they inherit all the good things God promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And their comfort will come. That Spirit of God will come in them so they keep his commandments. They'll accept the new covenant, the renewed covenant, as talked about in Jeremiah. We continue on. We finish up here in Genesis in chapter 50 and verses 22 through 26. And Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's house, and Joseph lived 110 years. And Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the third generation. The children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were brought up upon Joseph's knee. And Joseph said to his brethren, I die, and God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land into the land which he swore to Abraham, and to Isaac, and to Jacob. And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you and you shall carry up my bones from here. And Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him. He was put in a coffin in Egypt. Okay. So he's 110 years old. He's dwelt in, remember, as I mentioned earlier, as far came there when he's 39, died when he's 56. He lives there 54 years. Okay. Past that. And there's something important about this, and I want to show this, hopefully make it a little easier. Joseph here dies in our land, remember, counting from when that was formed out of the dust, in year 2369. As we discussed earlier, the exodus from Egypt is going to be year 2513. That's 144 years later. That's the maximum amount of time that Israel was in slavery. We'll perhaps look at that in a little more detail in the future lesson, but only the slavery portion was 144 years. 215 in the land of Canaan, a land that was not their own. And now 71 years have went by where they're in Egypt, in a land that's not their own. Strangers, okay, living in the midst of another people. Now, 144, there's 144,000 of the tribes of Israel I mentioned earlier. Also, the wall that surrounds the New Jerusalem is 144 cubits. Hearkening back to this, perhaps 1 cubit for every year that Israel was in slavery in Egypt. Now, so these are his great grandchildren here. and God will surely visit you. And also notice I mentioned earlier about remember Joseph married an Egyptian. Some of that simulation a minute ago. That's the mother of these children. So they got some Egyptian look to them. Well, his brothers had married Canaanites he saw before, and they're undoubtedly in this period of assimilation are going to marry and become looking more Egyptian in as far as their skin features, the features of their skin color, except go. And that's part of that simulation. Jews today come in every color, every eye color, every hair color, every type of hair, except because of this intermarriage. But God's not lost track of one of them, and neither has Satan. Hashatan inspired Hitler. There's a man named Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Speyer is actually Hitler's best friend, and he was a Lutheran pastor. It was not like his father at all. And one day he's out there shaking the hands of his congregation. People have been meeting in the same church for over 200 years. And the SS shows up and takes some of his congregants away because this was these people's notification they had Jewish ancestry. They did not even know it themselves because in some of their cases, someone back. Wait, they've been going to the same church for 150 years. Some of them, 100 years minimum. These same families going there over and over again. But somewhere back there, someone married, someone moved from one town to another, changed their name, married in, didn't tell anyone, but they still got their sins still got found out and drug off to the Holocaust. Because what Hitler did was he had schools all over Germany, have a special throughout the country. Gave all the classrooms, all the teachers gave all the kids an assignment to show their family tree all the way back to the third generation, great grandparents, because usually people don't know any further back than that. But usually grandma's alive, you can ask her who her parents were. And if not, the mom probably at least knows who her parents and their grandparents were. Dad does. Okay. So if one of them was Jewish, off to the Holocaust. Well, how did Hitler know? Because of the last names. Ludwig the Mad before him, that guy who made the castle that inspired Cinderella's castle at Disney World. His hobby was building castles, and they were expensive. And he's called the Mad. He came up with crazy ways to raise money to build them. And one of them was he made a name tax. And if you didn't pay it, they assigned a name to you. It was usually a bad name, kind of like Doomkopf, dumbhead. If you paid the minimal tax, you got to keep your name. But again, it was assigned. But it was a decent name. But if you wanted a really good name, you could literally buy yourself a good name. Like Rosenberg, Rose, city of Rose, city of roses, okay? Things like that. Well, the Jewish people were either assigned names or bought good names, and the Germans knew who they were by their last name alone. It marked them. Hence the reason why their ancestor may have changed his name, but Germans were meticulous records keeper, and they had a record. Oh, Mr. Schnitzel over here was Mr. Rosenberg over there, So, even their family perhaps didn't know they had Jewish ancestry. So, Hitler was a servant of Satan for certain, and Satan knew this. You can't escape it. So Joseph's children are becoming more and more Egyptian looking. Chances are, McClure, a greater than 50% chance there's a lot more Egyptian than the sins of Jacob to married an Egyptian. Talk about Manasseh, son Ephraim, and more and more so. So he sees that progression going on, not just in their clothing, but in the appearance of their body as well. but he knows that God's going to bring him back. Notice his faith in what God had told Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And because of that, he wants them to bury his bones in there. And notice when he dies, he's also given the royal treatment. And I'll talk a little bit more extensively about the tomb of Joseph in a future lesson. But here's a little bit more information about it right here. He's given the royal treatment, and one thing we know is they found his tomb in Egypt with his name on it that the Egyptians gave him, and he's been made a mummy just like Jacob. That's what the text tells us here. He's been put in an elaborate sarcophagus or coffin in Egypt, kind of like think King Tut or whatever. But his pyramid was a smaller pyramid next to a greater one. And that pharaoh, Egyptian history, and tells in the hieroglyphics, even carved in stone, says about how this guy got all the wealth of Egypt through the process we saw that we talked about with Joseph earlier. So so his smaller pyramid was right next to the pyramid of the pharaoh that he, in his words, was a father to. And that, so there's a little bit more about his tomb. And we're going to leave there with that today as we wrap up. And again, a future lesson, we'll look at some more information. We'll look at a little bit more about this. But Joseph was faithful to the end. And now there's only 144 years are left until the Exodus comes. And we'll leave you on that thought. That's all I have for this week. Until next week, shalom.